Good evening and welcome to CYC News for the 26th of June 2016 and 19 Bauna 17:32 AM. I'm Angie Victor. In today's headlines, the UK's historic referendum voting to leave the EU. A gunman is shot dead after taking hostages at a German cinema. Gun control protest sparks chaotic scenes in US Congress. Boko Haram refugees are starved to death. Australia's election campaigns are getting hotter as the date gets closer. Fans angry over missing iPhone 7 headphone socket. It gripped the world for 8 hours, but the UK has finally voted to leave the European Union, 52% to 48%, forcing the resignation of Prime Minister David Cameron and dealing the biggest blow to the European project of greater unity since World War II. The turnout was 72.1%, the highest in a national poll since the 1992 general election. A petition calling for a second referendum because the turnout was below 75% and the majority below 60% has attracted 82,284 signatures. Global financial markets plunged on Friday after the results, and the pound fell as much as 10% against the dollar to touch levels last seen in 1985, on fears the decision could hit investment in the world's fifth largest economy, threaten London's role as a global financial capital, and usher in months of political uncertainty. Moreover, the former London mayor said the UK had a glorious opportunity to control its own taxes and borders and find our voice in the world again. And it expected that the European Parliament and the European Council approve the leave as soon as possible before England is officially out.
I know there's a lot of concern about Britain voting in the referendum to leave the EU. And of course, it's an unknown, and that was one of the reasons many people were saying it's better to stay. It's an unknown. What does it practically mean? What steps are taken? The first thing that we know as Christians is that we are in the hands of a mighty God who pre-existed the EU and will outlast us all, and we're confident we're in his hands. So we're not concerned. We also know that political systems come and go, and countries and nations adapt. It's the choice of the people, and so therefore it's something that will be embarked on. Nothing will happen immediately. It's going to take time, and it's going to take deliberation as to what happens, how it happens, how long it takes to happen. So I'm just saying to people, don't be too concerned. Life will go on, and we know that whatever God leads us to, in whatever situation, we're in his hands and we're safe. All we need to do is continue witnessing as Christians, continue to be righteous, continue to be faithful, continue to be honest in what we do, and continue to shine his light at times of uncertainty when there is so much worse going on in the world and we see Christians witnessing. We need to do the same thing.
In Germany, a gunman took hostages at a cinema in a small town in western Germany on Thursday before police shot him dead. A police spokesman confirmed that no other people were injured. German television showed pictures of heavily armed police wearing helmets and body armor, storming the Kinopolis complex in Viernheim, and a couple fleeing from the building. The man had fired at least one shot at the Kinopolis complex before reportedly barricading himself inside. Hesse State Interior Minister Peter Both said the man died in a struggle with police and that there was no evidence that anyone else was injured or killed. Mr. Boyth told State Parliament the gunman had a rifle or long gun and appeared to have been a disturbed man. The US Supreme Court on Thursday dealt President Barack Obama a harsh defeat by blocking his plan to spare millions of illegal immigrants from deportation in a split 4-4 ruling he called frustrating to those aiming to fix America's broken immigration system. The ruling, coming 7 months before Obama's term in office ends, marked the latest success that his Republican adversaries have had in thwarting a major policy initiative of the Democratic president. It also guarantees that immigration will remain a prominent part of the campaign ahead of the November 8th election in which voters will pick his successor. Obama's 2014 plan was tailored to let roughly 4 million people get into a program that shields them from deportation and supplies work permits. However, it's only for those who have lived illegally in the United States at least since 2010, have no criminal record, and have children who are U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents. In the U.S. presidential election, Republican nominee Donald Trump has called Hillary Clinton the most corrupt candidate in U.S. history. Mr. Trump said the woman he will face in November's election was a world-class liar who had perfected the politics of profit while Secretary of State. He said in a broad speech in New York that she got rich making people poor. Mrs. Clinton said the speech was more hypocritical lies. Mr. Trump is trailing in the polls and has had a tough couple of weeks, with much criticism within his own party for his response to the Orlando nightclub shooting. But on Wednesday, the businessman hit his Democratic rival with a full force, saying she does not have the temperament or judgment to be president, and she refuses to recognize the threat of radical Islamic terrorism. On the other hand, Hillary Clinton says presumptive Republican nominee Donald Trump would be reckless with the U.S. economy and send the country into a recession. She said in Ohio that his policies would hurt workers still recovering from the U.S. recession in 2008. She said he does not have the temperament to lead the U.S. economy, and said small businesses and working families have reason to worry if he wins. And still in the U.S., at the U.S. Congress, chaotic scenes have been in the lower house as Democrats staged a sit-in to demand a vote on gun control legislation. By Wednesday evening, some 168 House Democrats out of 188 and 34 senators out of 44 were on the floor of the House. Democrats began singing "We Shall Overcome" and held up the names of gun attack victims. Republicans adjourned the House early on Thursday to try to quash the sit-in, switching off the TV cameras, but some Democrats remained, streaming speeches live via phones despite breaking rules on broadcasting. The protest comes in the wake of the recent shootings in Orlando, the deadliest in modern U.S. history. And it's worth mentioning that 150 mass shootings have occurred in 2016, and 6,380 people have been killed in gun incidents this year. In Nigeria, nearly 200 refugees fleeing Boko Haram militants have starved to death over the past month. A catastrophic humanitarian emergency is unfolding at a camp it visited where 24,000 people have taken refuge. Many inhabitants are traumatized, and 1 in 5 children are suffering from acute malnutrition. The Islamist group's 7-year rebellion has left 20,000 people dead and more than 2 million people displaced. Nigeria's military has carried out a large-scale offensive against them, but Boko Haram still attacks villages in the northeast, destroying homes and burning down wells. In Australia, the Labour and Liberal governments are playing tit-for-tat. Opposition leader Bill Shorten is continuing to warn the government plans to privatise Medicare, countering accusations of a scare campaign by claiming the coalition's plan is scary. Mr. Shorten said in an ABC interview that he would not be deterred from his campaign against the government's healthcare policy. The Prime Minister has Labour's Medicare claims the biggest lie of the campaign, and he explicitly ruled out privatising any part of Medicare. Malcolm Turnbull said, "Every element of Medicare, every aspect of Medicare that is delivered by government today will continue to be delivered by government in the future, full stop. Medicare will never, ever, ever be privatized. It is a core government service." The Christian Democratic Party are highlighting their election campaign to defend Christian and conservative values. Same-sex marriage is a hot topic as new candidates campaign across Australia to show that the CDP is the only conservative option in this year's elections. They will be focusing on major pro-economic and pro-family issues such as hands off our super, no change to superannuation, maintaining house values, no change to negative gearing laws, one law for all Australians, no Sharia law, advocating for the aged, more jobs, and no age discrimination for older Australians, no tax hikes, encouraging lower taxes and genuine reform, no sale, putting an end to selling off of our sovereign land, freedom for all, freedom for religious beliefs and freedom of speech, no change, retention of the traditional definition of marriage, bring it on, let the people speak through a plebiscite, fighting back, defending our Christian values and beliefs. CYC viewers can also watch the election special on the live program Ask, Seek, Knock on Thursday at 8 p.m. Sydney time. According to the International Monetary Fund's annual assessment of the economy, the US has been warned about its high poverty rate. The fund said about 1 in 7 people were living in poverty and that it needed to be tackled urgently. It recommended raising the minimum wage and offering paid maternity leave to women to encourage them to work. The report also cut the country's growth forecast for 2016 to 2.2% from a previous prediction of 2.4%. The US House of Representatives on Thursday agreed to $1.1 billion to fight the Zika virus, shortchanging President Barack Obama's $1.9 billion funding request and angering Democrats by making other cuts to pay for it. The House approved a funding deal that had been agreed to on Wednesday by Republicans from both the House and the Senate. But the bill's future was uncertain in the Senate, where the Democratic minority has more power to stop legislation, and Democratic leader Harry Reid has declared his opposition. Republican House Speaker Paul Ryan said that it is a responsible plan and assures the administration will continue to have the needed resources to protect the public. And to our final news bulletin. More than 300,000 people have signed a petition urging Apple not to ditch the headphone socket from the version of the iPhone due for release this autumn. Online reports suggest Apple plans to omit the 3.5mm socket to make the iPhone 7 thinner and more waterproof, with more room for the battery. The Fast Company reported it would rely on the Lightning cable port currently used for charging for sound output. Others suggest Apple will ship the iPhone 7 with wireless headphones. The Sum of Us, a website fighting for people over profits, which organized the petition, said not only will this force iPhone users to dole out additional cash to replace their hi-fi headphones, it will single-handedly create mountains of electronic waste that likely won't be recycled. And that's all for CYC News. A reminder you can watch this news bulletin again throughout the week on YouTube. I'm Angie Victor from the CYC studios in Sydney, Australia. Have a good night.